Hello, my name is Shin Mizuno, and our book was 2 years before the Mast. I'll be talking about the ethics and comparison section. So the ethics, main points I will talk about is the treatment of natives and racism, and the treatment of the crew, as well as an example of a toxic and unethical mindset from the captain. First, I would like to start by talking about the ranking systems among people. A pattern that I have noticed in history, in society in general, is the ranking of people. As a species, a way to have order and function within our community is to have somebody below you. So this picking on a certain individual or a certain group of people, it breeds a type of unity and kinship between the higher people or the people that are doing the bullying or the oppressing. It gives them a feeling of dominance and superiority. And it's like a drug to the human mind. It feels really good to do these acts. Example, of course, is group bullying in schools, rankings among education levels, as people with lower education tend to be oppressed or not so seriously taken by the people with higher educations, and ranking regarding race, of course. So in the book, there is visible oppression and racism within the natives or the Native Americans. There's a caste system within the people, equating to how much Spanish blood that you have within yourself. The Indians, or more accurate, the Native Americans, are serfs or slaves, subhuman per se in the book. If you are a half-breed with some Spanish blood, you are above the natives, of the pure blood natives. And if you are of pure blood, of pure Spanish blood, then you are above everybody else. A lot of this actually has to do with the aftermath of the Spanish colonization and also the prostitution for the visiting sailors that came to Native Americans. Prostitution kind of gives an image that they are not human. They're basically just items or usables. And I feel like this is the reasonings for that. Another one is spreadings of Christianity. And this is spreading of Christianity is converting them to make them more civilized, quote unquote. It's a common theme throughout history, and it's visible in this book as well. The issue with these is that the natives are crippled without their community and culture. This is also seen in history, and as we've learned in lectures as well, it's something that happened in Hawaii as well. I'll talk about that a little bit after. So going to the treatment of the crew, power, superiority, and dictatorship is held by one individual, which is the captain in this case. The crew is often mistreated and they don't have many means of retaliation. Stewards especially are treated like personal slaves to the captain. And flogging is often used as a method of force or a method of control by the captain. So I would like to talk a little bit about the toxic and unethical mindsets of the captain of this book. The captain in the book, I think just closer to chapter the 20s of chapters, captain actually accuses the sailor for talking back, when in reality he just injured his hand and he was kind of cursing under his breath. So he's going to get flogged, and the sailor is obviously confused because he doesn't know why he's going to get flogged. And note that the sailor's defense here was that, well, first of all, he didn't talk back, but also that he is not a Negro slave, which is also quite the toxic mindset from the sailor. But, well, the retaliation or the phrase that the captain says after is that, oh, I'm going to make you feel like a Negro slave, and starts whipping him basically. Another sailor, he was known as the Swede, questions the captain for this action and basically is confused, like, why is this guy getting flogged? He didn't do anything wrong. And the captain basically said, the Swede also gets flogged by the captain because he's talking back to the captain. And the captain also says that he enjoys flogging, and it basically treats them both like basically subhumans. And after the flogging, he doesn't even let the Swede get medicine after the Swede actually tries to basically patch himself up, and immediately orders him to row the captain or himself to shore right after, which is very toxic. It's messed up. And again, ranking of people I'd like to talk about. Apparently, according to the conclusion section of this book, 3/4 of the seamen are comprised of minorities at this time, and many lack education, and some can be even convicted individuals. Especially like social classes speak mounds in this community, as common sailors are often working classes, and working classes, and officers are generally from like a higher class, a higher working class even. It also doesn't help that many of the seamen are actually people that are minorities, yes, people that are minorities. One example from the book that actually shows the ranking systems actually is when Dana, he is able to return home early from the alert because of his family in Boston. And why is that? This is actually because the captain fears for retribution from Dana's family, since Dana's family is one of the higher classes. This makes me think that the story may have ended quite differently if Dana actually came from a poor family instead of actually being of someone of status. Who knows, maybe he never actually went back to the alert and he could have passed away potentially. So the conclusion also talks about the legal battles between the captain and the seamen. The captain is also under the law, so he should be punished for unethical behavior, right? But this is actually not exactly true. The captains and the crew are not equal in the court, even though it seems so under the law. First of all, there's the difference in class, there's education, family, friends, and most importantly, the public view, because in the end, I feel like public view is actually the most shifting of the court's opinions and views. There was two patterns that Dana has expressed that happens with the captains. One is he will never do such a thing. He wouldn't even hurt an insect. He is such a kind-hearted soul. He would never do any kind of abuse to the people. And the second pattern is basically he has a family. He needs to support his wife and his children. You can't be convicting him for such acts, as he needs to support his family. So either way, it's just kind of one-sided. It's not really fair for the seamen, as they are not of higher class. They don't have this kind of defense, basically. The current world, though, according to the book, there are current like protections basically for the seamen, like for example, the American Seamen's Friends Associations and other small societies, which are here to assist them. So I would like to talk about the comparison section now. Main points that I got from this book, or the main message from the book, is a lot of it was inequality and oppression, and I also saw a couple of neglect. And the rest was adventure and basically life on the ship. But I would like to focus more on these 2 points right now. So one real life example that I can think of with inequality and oppression is Japan. I myself is Japanese, and there are some parts of history that I have learned that I would like to talk about here, and also from personal experience. Japan had its fair share of history with relating to inequality and blood and the hierarchy, or how high class you are. Blood is something that is highly valued in older Japan and often a source of inequality and oppression. The mix of blood, or like mud blood, mixed blood, with other Asians was seen as lower class, and sometimes even looked down upon because you have other Asian blood and you're not of pure Japanese blood. A lot of this, I feel like, comes from the wartime in Japan, when they have committed quite the atrocities. Example is with the Chinese and the Koreans, which have been inhumanly treated, very mistreated, until the defeat of Japan in World War II, dark history. I also have personal experience with my older family members in Japan. They would have a stereotype, and they would rather have me not date other Asians, or if I was going to get married, they don't want me to be with another type of Asian that's not of pure Japanese blood. And if I was going to marry somebody that is not of pure Japanese blood, they would want it to be a high-class white person to have. Yeah, there's still that oppression and a little bit of racism. Not too fond of that. Another example is actually from a lecture, the colonization of Hawaii. So the denial of Hawaii's religion and identity is a pretty big thing, and also something that sparks a lot of conflict in the current Hawaii. One thing is Christianity was spread out throughout Hawaii in order to educate and modernize the Hawaiians as they needed help to see the right way or the most human way back then, which of course killed some Hawaiian traditions and was really not something that I'm really happy about. The Hawaiian language was also denied, and for the reason why English is mostly spoken here in Hawaii. Values such as land ownership and Western rules also set in. I've learned about this in the fisheries class actually, but this led to many of the fish ponds being taken away from the natives as they don't really know about this land ownership, as this doesn't really exist in the older Hawaii. And they needed to sign like a treaty, and then a lot of the locals didn't sign this treaty because they didn't understand it, and because of this, a lot of fish ponds were taken away from the locals. And of course, the annexation that took place, which really did strip the Hawaiians' identity quite literally and quite illegally. A real life example of manliness and neglect, which is the other part that I wanted to talk about. There is a lot of masculinity at the sea, which I have read through in this book, that could lead to shared neglect. There are a couple of stereotypes such as men don't complain, men don't cry, men can manage their own, and men must stay strong, right? All those masculinity things. These values are quite often seen in our current societies and can definitely lead to like a type of neglect, with some words that should be spoken being unheard. One recent example that I could think of is actually the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard trial that you've probably heard about. Before Johnny Depp's recent victory in like 2012, recently, Amber was actually the victor back then. And she was even the face of domestic violence as a domestic violence survivor, and the head of the Me Too movement that was a thing a little bit back then in Twitter, if you remember that. The main reason for this actually being that there's no way such a large masculine man like Johnny Depp would be able to abuse a woman, Amber Heard, in such a manner. And basically, well, this was solved in the end. Amber Heard was the real abuser, and Johnny Depp got, I guess, the justice that he deserved. So I'm happy about that. But again, manliness and the masculinity can lead to neglect, along with what I've seen on the book. And actually, as a bonus, I would like to talk about my grandfather, because he actually happens to be a captain for a ship, like a large cargo tanker in Japan. And there was a point in the book where Dana expresses that he almost fell off the mast and basically almost plummeted to his death into the ocean, or even worse, on the deck, right? And he basically says that these near-death situations are laughed off, or like they're put as jokes in the end, in order to preserve the spirit and the masculinity of men. This is true because my grandfather, there's an example of my grandfather. He actually fell off of a very high ladder at some point, and he plummeted, and broke his ribs and also fractured his hip bone. But he often uses this as a joke within the family, and he really just jokes about it. And another thing was, as the captain needs to have full responsibility of the crew, because he is the one that is in command. The captain's command is, of course, absolute, and any mistakes made by anybody on the ship is, in the end, the captain's responsibility. So these are some points that were true that I've seen or personally experienced or personally known to be true from the book, and I thought that was very interesting. All right, thank you.